crafting the American identity.
Well, part of why this is so threatening for people is because essentially what our educational system has done, what our social conditioning system has done from childhood on, is created an identity for us as Americans and carefully crafted a mythology that we all sort of buy into, and that we become a part of, and while we want to call it the American dream, and don't get me wrong, there are people who have, obviously been very successful in the United States, but, when the goal of creating this mythology is to win you over, what else are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on the losers? No, of course you're not going to focus on the losers, You're not going to focus on the history of inequality in the United States, or, civil injustice or economic injustice. You're not going to focus on any of those things. The reason why, for instance, the labor movement in the United States is a tiny segment of our educational system when it should be the most important. Supposedly the founders, celebrated revolution in the sense of when a people, are unhappy with their form of government, seek to create a new form of government. Okay, that's what the founders supposedly celebrated, right? And yet they created a system that is extremely difficult to change and overwhelmingly benefits them and their class, which was the top, less than 1%. And so this is all part of the mythology created by them. And this identity that we are raised with is something that most people do not even question, that I'm an American. And yes, there are benefits that come with being an American. But, we have to understand that this is a type of psychological manipulation. And people need to basically separate themselves from that, your identity, your nationalistic identity is not who you are. There's an old saying that it's the winners who have wrote history. And so we get a version of history from the winners. And that's essentially where this American mythology about the history and the founding of the United States comes from.
And see, it's an interesting thing to look at, to see what kind of a response I get from making this video. Because for some people, it is going to be like I am questioning, like a religion. Like I'm saying Jesus is not real or God does not exist, by saying that, the United States is not a democracy, was not founded as a democracy, and never has been a democracy, is going to be so threatening to people. And the question is, why? And so the crafting of this American identity is something that has been going on a very long time. And is in its design is designed to make it very personal to you. It is a part of your identity that you are an American, okay? And all those values that go along with this idea of being an American, regardless of whether they are factual or true, doesn't matter, okay? What matters is that you are trained to essentially think that America means X, Y, and Z, freedom, justice, and democracy, even though, workers had no rights in the United States until the 1920s. Even though, we took all this land away from indigenous people, even though, large portions of the United States were built by slave labor. None of these things matter. What it matters is that the United States represents freedom, democracy, and justice. And so you see, this identity has been carefully crafted for you to believe it, regardless of whether it is even real. And we really have to look at the story of the founding of the United States as a creation myth so powerful that people still believe it today, regardless of the fact that there is really very little basis in fact to support it as truth. And I know many people will debate me on this, but this is just a clear example of the power mythology has over us as human beings.